Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Vertical Integration and the Fashion Supply Chain, brought to you by Transformers Foundation and Manufactured. So my name is Annie and I'm representing the Transformers Foundation today, joined by Kim van der Weerd and Jessie Li, who are the co-hosts of Manufactured podcast and your moderators for today as well. We're also joined by our lovely panelists who we'll be introducing in just a second. But for those of you who don't know us, Manufactured is a podcast focused on featuring supplier perspectives on sustainable fashion. And Transformers Foundation is the unified voice representing the denim supply chain, all the way from farmers and chemical suppliers to denim mills and jeans factories. So the both of us spend a lot of time talking to fashion suppliers and wanted to join forces to create a space for cross-pollination between the denim supply chain and the fashion supply chain at large. So we at the foundation also approached Kim and Jessie because their Loose Thread series really caught our attention, which allows suppliers to share their thoughts anonymously. And with our ethical report that was released last year, we know how scary it can be as a supplier to voice your opinions publicly. So we approached Manufactured and this partnership was born. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Kim and Jessie, but I'll be assisting in the background with Q&A. So please submit any questions you might have for our panelists in the Q&A. And also please feel free to start a discussion in the chat box for any comments that you have. And yeah, with that, Kim and Jessie, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Annie.
Yes, good afternoon, evening, morning, depending on where you are. Probably there's people in all time zones. So as Annie said, for those of you who don't know us, Jessie and I are co-hosts of Manufactured, which is a podcast that seeks to feature supplier voices on sustainable fashion and increase mutual understanding across fashion supply chains. And I used to work as general manager of a garment factory in Cambodia, and Jessie has worked across the fashion supply chain in China and Cambodia. And we're really grateful to be collaborating with Transformers Foundation on this panel. Before I introduce each of our guests, I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts on why we are talking about vertical integration in the first place. On the one hand, I think increasingly, especially since the pandemic, we hear a lot about brands investing more deeply in a smaller group of supplier relationships. And also, I think as a result, expecting suppliers to bring more to the table. So for example, the latest State of Fashion report references a lot of different things that brands will be looking for from their strategic suppliers, like productivity, optimized inventory management, investment in technology, reduced environmental impact, flexibility, collaboration on components, agility, smaller batches, co-design, and more responsibilities for different parts of the production process are just a few things that are listed in that report. So that's a lot of things, and suppliers can't possibly do them all. And it's pretty important that they choose wisely, because in the same report, the State of Fashion 2021, there's a very sobering reality that's presented, which is that despite that many factories are shutting permanently as a result of the pandemic, just 17% of fashion companies say that they will co-invest in suppliers to secure future capacity. So which more exactly is most strategic, both from a business perspective, but also from the perspective of course, wanting and needing to accelerate sustainability change? So the three panelists we have from the fashion supply chain today are going to share their thoughts on these questions, as well as a little bit of their own vertical integration stories. So on that note, our first panelist is Ali Abdullah, who is the managing director of Diamond Denim in Pakistan, and he oversees raw material procurement, production, product development, sales, and finance for the company, which employs about 4,000 people. Diamond Denim started out as a Greece fabric weaver in the 1990s, and in 2013, they started making denim fabric, which then led them to go to doing assembly, which then led them back to making the yarn. And I think what's interesting to point out about Diamond Denim is that in addition to being vertically integrated, all of these production processes are being done in the same single location, in the same facility. And we'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. Our second panelist is Mr. Halit, who's the general manager and board member of Kipas Holdings. So Kipas is a Turkish company operating across 6 different industries with 25 factories and 10,000 employees. They started out with spinning in the late 80s, moving into weaving and ultimately assembly in the 90s before getting into other industries like paper, energy, and cement throughout the 2000s. Kipas has been a pioneer in the sustainability space. They were one of the first companies to start looking at more sustainable fabric options. And more recently, they've committed to being carbon positive by 2030, excuse me. And for Kipas, sustainability is not just about fabric, but about process and about control over process. And so we're going to hear a little bit about how being vertically integrated has given them control over that process. And last but not least, our third panelist is Anant Ahuja. And Anant is the head of organizational development at Shahi Exports and CEO and co-founder at Good Business Lab. Shahi was founded in 1974 by Anant's grandmother, who began as a sewing machine operator herself. Shahi is India's largest exporter of ready-made garments with over 100,000 employees, 3 mills, and 65 factories. They too do everything from spinning through to assembly of finished garments. And in addition to physical goods, they also offer a lot of soft services to the brands that they work with, like product design, logistics, vendor managed inventory. And through their work with Good Business Lab and the organizational development department within Shahi, sustainability and worker well-being have also become a kind of service that they offer the brands that they work with. So unlike Diamond, Denim, and Kipas, it's important to note that Shahi is not focused exclusively on denim and makes a wide range of different types of garments. So before we get into things, a quick note on the structure. We're going to allow each of the panelists some time to respond to some questions and to share a little bit about themselves before we ultimately open this up for Q&A and discussion, both amongst the panelists themselves, but also with the audience. So, Ali, I want to turn to you. Why did Diamond Denim gradually start to take on more and more parts of the denim production process?
Hi. Shortly after we started manufacturing denim fabrics in 2013, we came to a few key realizations about the market dynamics. The first one being that our customer wanted they wanted to order less, they wanted to keep their inventory levels as low as possible, and they wanted to make their decision making as late in the cycle given how fast fashion trends change these days. And another one was that they wanted to outsource or pass on more and more of their selection process out to garment makers. So in order to adapt to these rapidly evolving market dynamics, we made the decision to integrate forward into garment making and backwards into yarn manufacturing. So by doing this, we were able to optimize on timelines. So we were able to be faster. We were able to be more efficient in terms of costs as well. And at the same time, we were also able to maintain an influence on the development process of the fabric so that we can ensure that our raw material remains an important part of their product. Another key trend that we saw coming up was traceability and sustainability. And integration plays a massive role in helping us deliver that. So what it basically came down to at the time was how fast we can deliver a sustainable product to the customers. And that's why vertical integration just made a lot of sense for us. I couldn't hear you.
I don't hear you also. Hi, Kim, we can't hear you.
Oh,
I
sorry.
still can't hear you.
There, got it. I've got a double mute going on. I've got a mute button on my microphone and on What are we using? Zoom. Okay, so Ali, I want to go back to the single location. So you've talked about how for you vertical integration was in part a business decision about being able to sort of manage costs, about being able to offer lower inventory levels and having total control over the development process, as well as an important part of sustainability and being able to offer a traceable product quickly. But why in one place? Because that's pretty unusual to be doing. I mean, I can't even imagine a facility that has spinning and knitting or weaving and assembly and more happening in one building.
So it started off quite naturally because we had a lot of space available in the location, but ultimately it actually had a lot of benefits to doing it. So the logistics of it all were just simpler. To give you some examples, all of our teams sit together. So we're able to improve communication, reduce potential issues that we have in terms of quality, in terms of speed, in terms of timelines. So the issues are just sorted out faster. We have a central planning team that actually works to maintain an order equilibrium between the divisions so that we can ensure that if we need to speed up the fabric making process or the yarn making process, we need to shuffle some orders around to ensure that we maintain at optimal capacity to sort of hold our costs in place. We're able to do that more effectively in one location. We're able to have a centralized engineering and utility department. So we're able to not only keep our energy costs lower by making more energy in the same location, but we're also a bit more efficient by benefiting from the scale of it all. We don't have to transport any material. It's all done within the same four walls. We're able to use reusable packing materials because we're simply moving in the same facility and move back as soon as we're done using them. We're able to generally eliminate waste. In terms of water treatment, for example, we're able to treat all our water from our garment making and our fabric making and the little bit of water we use in the other spinning and weaving processes together. So it helps us lower the cost of that as well. So we're able to have that sustainability at a cheaper cost. We're working on investing in water recycling. So doing it at that larger scale will again have the same benefits in doing that. So we're just able to run a whole lot more efficiently. And at the end of the day, it's the customer who benefits from that by us being more sustainable and more economical as well.
It's interesting because, tell me if I got it right, but basically what I hear you saying is that like by having everything in one place, you're spreading all the various overheads of running a production, basically of any kind of production, out over multiple sort of parts of the production process. So for instance, you talked about planning, you talked about engineering, you talked about water treatment, and that sort of like all those fixed costs that a manufacturer might have to have if you are doing them in one location can be sort of spread out over more things.
Absolutely. It just makes it a whole lot easier. Obviously, the upfront investment is a bit higher, but the running costs are lower, and that helps us just be more efficient in general. But that's exactly what it is.
So I want to ask, because there's probably, I suspect that there are a lot of smaller manufacturers in the audience and who are looking at this or hearing your story and thinking, well, this all sounds great. And yes, okay, this sort of single location, this centralization might help or is useful advice to smaller players like us. But what really would your advice be to smaller manufacturers who, like you said, can't afford to make that upfront investment?
So one thing is clear that like you mentioned in your introduction as well, that a lot of this is what the customers are pushing us towards, and so when we actually started our vertical integration project, we very quickly realized that it's going to be a long-term implementation. The investment costs are quite high. So we said we put a time scale of a minimum of 4 to 5 years before we can be truly vertical. And but we could not afford to wait for 4 to 5 years before sort of leveraging from those benefits. So while we did not benefit from having everything in that single location, what we were able to do, or what we did do, was we sort of partnered with several spinning mills, where we locked in made capacity commitments and were able to take over part of their planning. So we were able to leverage the planning ability. We were able to even lower our costs by locking in certain capacities with them. And we did the same with garment makers as well, where we offered them attractive pricing. We offered them fixed capacities, and we also offered to work very closely with them in terms of fabric development, to be more sustainable, to make colors that wash off in certain ways that they can wash more sustainably, and various other factors. So they were able to sort of benefit. So all three parts put together, the spinning, the fabric, and the garments, we were effectively able to become virtually vertical. And so while you don't get all the benefits of being truly vertical, you can definitely get a lot of the benefits if you are able to form such partnerships.
What do you think? I mean, I'm thinking actually about the factory that I used to manage, and whether this is something that we would have been able to do, which was a small factory. And one of the things, like one of the questions that pops up into my head as I hear you speak is like, you know, we were not relative to most of our material vendors, we were not a very important customer. Like the volumes that we were buying relative to their total revenue was not very big. Do you think that this idea of being vertically integrated is still an option for companies like that?
I think it at the end of the day, it comes down to relationships with suppliers and vendors. In our case, we did work with several larger, significantly larger factories as well. We had very small capacity commitments with a couple of vendors. So it was just about sort of finding the right partners, let's say, in terms of, so at least in our case, the scale did not make that big of a difference, because we did work with small capacities. But I can see it being harder in some cases, and in some parts of the supply chain and in some industries, to be able to do that. But I think if we're able to identify the right partners, it's certainly possible.
I think that's a really interesting point, and just a little bit of context also for why I asked that question is because I think especially in sustainable fashion spaces, you hear a lot about leverage, ways of sort of having more leverage over your supply chain. And usually that's tied to size. And I think a lot of brands seek to sort of, you know, consolidate and coordinate their efforts in terms of dealing with their suppliers, because that gives them more quote unquote leverage. And so I really like this idea of what you're putting forward, which is that actually, you know, maybe leverage isn't the key, maybe it's relationships, and maybe leverage is part of a relationship, but it's also something much deeper than that. Thank you for sharing a bit about your story and about Diamond Denim. We're going to come back to you. I want to move now to Mr. Halit, who, as I mentioned, is of Kipas Holdings. Halit, I would like to start by asking you, you know, one of the things we talked about when we chatted last time is that being in control of the process is really important to Kipas, both from a sustainability perspective, but also just from a business perspective. I want to ask you to elaborate a little bit on that. Why is control over process so important to you?
Hello again. Yes, in terms of business perspective, first of all, it is quite important being a vertical operation, because the supply chain, as much as under your control, it gives business more flexibility to give better service to our customers. and it is a big power. And the fashion trends are changing very quickly. It's a fast fashion time, and we need to implement our products to existing fashion needs. So having everything vertical, it helps being flexible. And for sure, there is very significant cost efficiency. You are more under control all type of cost, and you can compete with fast fashion companies to give them better service also, and you can compete with your competitors better way. But at the same time, it is not easy because all the challenges which may happen during production processes, it is not easy to manage. You know, textile is very challenging business. There are a lot of faults, there are a lot of mistakes during productions, and when there is a problem in a weaving stage, you normally easily can blame a yarn producer, but in this case, you have no chance to blame anybody. It's yourself. Or a dye house, it is the same. They blame a fabric manufacturer, but it is yourself. So it is a big challenge. You cannot blame anybody. You have to solve everything internally. And another challenge, you know, we are now living in audit time. All customers are auditing. There are companies are auditing. We have self-auditings. So our business places are very much bored about being audited from somebody. But when you are vertical, main customer see only one entity. I mean, it is Kipas, okay, but Kipas is 25 factories. So one of our factory have a major mistake that that this brand doesn't want. It affects all these 25 factories. So it is also not easy situation. So it is, I think, a big challenge for current times. But anyway, it is very convenient to compete with our customers and to survive in this profit-oriented business. And in terms of sustainability, actually, we are now benefiting more about being vertical and being more sustainable company, because you know, transportation and carbon dioxide emissions is very important, and as much as we are close to raw material and all spinning, weaving, or knitting and dyeing, supply chain is close to each other, and there is, as much as transportation occurs, it is more benefitable, and there are less carbon dioxide emission. It is, I think, the it is the biggest benefit about being vertical. And for the countries like Turkey, I'm sure it is same with many countries. We are also growing our own raw material in some cases, and we are close to raw material sources. And by doing that, having our own spinning, our weaving, and our dyeing, finishing denim facilities all together, there are very minimum transportation occurs. Additionally, controlling the waste is very important, because currently we are doing a lot of production from our pre-consumer waste. It is post-industrial in other terms. So we are managing our reusable form wastes, and we are also returning, we reopening these products, and we make again, we spin new yarns and we make new fabrics out of that. So it is under our control. It helps us to give good service to our customers. And there are more benefits about sustainability in terms of labor side, because we are confident about using our labor force very effectively. So it also helps our organization.
Thank you for sharing a bit about the Kipas story. I want to go back and ask you about something you said about auditing, because I think for the suppliers in the room, the proverbial room, so to speak, this is not a surprising thing to hear. But if there are perhaps other people from other parts of the fashion supply chain, or maybe even just sustainable fashion advocates in general, this might be a surprising thing to hear. Can you elaborate a little bit about what you meant by that, and why you sort of are expressing this frustration?
Yeah, actually, I meant that issue because being vertical with so many factories is a challenge. Because there can be in different locations, and all are under same entity. And when our global customers wants to audit any of them, and any mistake they have any of these companies, it affects all those factories, and it is a very big system. So it is a challenge, but I can make some comment about auditing system. There are a lot of audits of a lot of standards from a lot of brands, a lot of global brands, and a lot of institutions. So it is I think another sustainability topic in my case, because everybody wants to make their own standards, and they have all their own criteria. There should be something that brands gather and accept, and make things easier. Otherwise, they are doing the same thing in different shapes. Okay, I understand there are also companies making money out of that, but it is, I think, another consuming of a lot of time.
Thank you for clarifying. So I want to move on to Anant. And Anant, we recently, so you've been on the Manufactured podcast, and we recently, and I know that you are good friends with the team at HK Rita, and we recently did a podcast episode with Edwin Kay of HK Rita, and he said something that's really stuck with us, and that you and me together with Jessie have talked about before. And that's the reality that actually the prices for physical goods are deflationary. And that's not going to change. A manufacturer is never going to be paid more for making a good than they are today. And his advice to suppliers was basically to get into data and services, and to find different ways of adding value that maybe don't have anything to do with the physical properties of the product itself. So I'd like to maybe have you share a little bit about, because Shahi is of course vertically integrated in terms of its production processes, but you've also taken on several additional types of services. And I'd like to ask you to share a little bit about the operational services that Shahi offers the brands that it works with.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Kim. Yeah, just to first address Edwin's point, I think it's pretty obvious when you observe how over the years with rising labor costs and rising costs of so many other components of what it takes to make a garment, we're seeing declining costs in goods that consumers are having access to. If you look back in time, it wasn't as easily, it wasn't as readily available to purchase garments for as cheap as you can buy them today. So I think that's a really keen and sharp insight from Edwin. So I think at Shahi, obviously, that message has been sort of internalized in a few different ways. But maybe I can kind of, take a step back, just go over a few aspects of Shahi, which, you did mention in the introduction, but just to give context, and then talk about, some of the services that Shahi offers and the value it brings to our customers. So as you mentioned, Shahi's a fully vertically integrated manufacturing company. What I mean by that is we basically source cotton after the ginning process, and then we export finished goods in the form of ready-made garments. The business, like you said, it was started by my grandmother in the 70s. It started as like a small kind of home-based setup with just a handful of sewing machines. So it's definitely been a long journey towards achieving, the level of capabilities that we have today. And all of this was done in order to remain competitive and to grow. You're hearing from two other great manufacturers, and it just goes to show how much competition there is as a supplier in this industry, and even as a brand, and many other parts of this industry face similar levels of intense competition. But one key motivation at Shahi that's kind of fueled this growth has been sort of this idea. I think it's been realized more recently, but it's this idea that this sector, the garment industry, the textile industry, it has this really unique ability to create jobs for low-income workers, and in particular women, who, in a country like India are largely locked out of the labor force. So I think when that sort of, I guess you could say, like mission to society, or however you want to think about it, has been really powerful kind of motivation beyond just maximizing profits and, so on. So that's just a bit of context and background, but I'll quickly share kind of 4 broad areas of expansion or of services that Shahi offers to our customers. I think, a lot of this has already been covered. I'll try to maybe touch on some that haven't been addressed as much. So, we talked earlier a little bit about design, and in this part of the world, there is a lot of design talent. So Shahi's been able to kind of leverage that. And at this point, we actually have a team of over 100 designers who are in-house, and we pitch designs for different collections to our customers. Speaking on vertical integration, or breaking down vertical integration into a couple different components. Firstly, you have fabric innovation. So being able to make our own fabric, it allows us to sort of innovate on new materials and experiment with that. Recently, something that's been really exciting is we've been working on sustainable fabrics, including cradle to cradle certified woven dress, which I think was a lot easier to do at Shahi because we had that, backward integration. Cost saving, I think, that's obviously initial main motivation for most people. But, to put that into perspective, around half the cost of a garment is the fabric cost. And if you can't control that, then a lot of your ability to, to grow and be successful is out of your control. So we're now able to kind of save on the costs associated with dealing with vendors for buying fabrics, and also things that you may not think about, such as the time you spend negotiating with fabric mills and dealing with, the kinds of issues that can happen on the quality front. And then the 2 other components on vertical integration, one is traceability, which has come up already in today's talk. But yeah, just being able to manage the entire sort of process of production from spinning onwards. It gives us traceability into the materials, the environmental impact, and of course the working conditions, which I think is, a growing topic of conversation. And then last of all is speed. I think I mentioned this already, but saving time on negotiating, being able to stock fabric that we know we'll need, even, some of the things that Ali mentioned about the closeness. So here in India, the supply chain, everything exists. There's India's the largest exporter of cotton. There's a long history of textiles. There's a lot of labor force and garment factories, but the entire supply chain is sort of dispersed all over the country. So, being able to consolidate it in one place can save you from having to, buy cotton here, make the yarn here, and have all of those like logistical challenges. So yeah, I think that covers vertical integration. And, maybe, as we go forward in this conversation, I can talk sort of about worker well-being and some of the other services.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really sort of thinking about worker well-being as a service or a value added or a thing that a supplier can provide leadership on that adds value to a brand, I think is a really interesting concept and sort of flips the paradigm of, I think, in the last 30, 40 years, a lot of these quote unquote sustainability initiatives have been a lot more top down, but we'll come back to that. I want to highlight one thing that you said, which is that you have 100 designers on your team, which is a lot. And I think especially interesting, given that I think sort of in the public imagination, there's this idea that what the brand brings to the table is the design aspect, whereas what the supplier brings to the table or the manufacturer brings to the table is executing, figuring out how to, make those designs and bring them to life. Can you elaborate just a little bit about like what exactly are they designing? Are they designing finished garments? Are they designing fabrics? Are they designing, all of the above?
Yeah, it's really everything. I think, the team of designers are constantly pitching different ideas. As a supplier, we sort of have the advantage of working with many different customers. So we're the manufacturing extension of a lot of different brands. So it allows us to sort of understand trends, to a different degree. I think that it really depends on which brand you're talking about. If you look at some, fast fashion companies, they're pumping out ideas and designs at such high rates that it's difficult for them to continuously innovate. And some of it isn't even innovation. It's just knowing the trend and designing the right product and right color and so on. So I think, while there is a lot of talent and a lot of good ideas here, just having that service and ability to support brands in kind of their design decisions and ideas is super helpful. And yeah, it's been something we've been offering for the past 10 or 15 years. And whether or not brands want to use it is totally up to them. But the fact that, there are a handful of brands out of our customer base that are interested makes it a valuable and useful service for us to offer.
Thank you for telling us a bit about the Shahi story. Before I open it up to questions from the audience, I want to ask the three of you and Jessie, is there anything that you want to say that you feel you haven't had the chance to say or would like to respond or ask one another?
Actually,
Jessie?
I do have I do have a question, but I noticed some questions overlapped with our guests. So maybe I let our participants. Yes, maybe we let them ask first. I let you ask that question first, and then we see.
Okay. So one of the audience questions that we have is about pre-consumer waste. And how do you dispose of or use pre-consumer textile waste? Is there anyone who particularly wants to answer this question?
I can give some comments about this because we are very deeply involved about this issue. We are offering yarns and fabrics with pre-consumer waste currently. We have a very significant amount of production, so we have post-industrial, in other words, pre-consumer waste, and we are also collecting from garment companies cutting wastes, and we sort them and we reopen these wastes into fiber form. And we can spin this fiber as yarn again. Depending on the need, we are able to spin up to 100% pre-consumed content, open-end yarns up to 20 singles, and also ring spun yarn. Again, up to 20 singles, we can make 100%, and also finer counts, we are blending like 20% or less. This is the general way we are using our waste.
Thank you, Halit. There's another question from the audience about, and I'm going to put this one to Ali, about how has vertical integration in any way helped with better planning / forecasting and better control over stock management?
It's helped us massively with planning, as I mentioned, but I forgot to mention our own inventory levels, and I think that's a great point. So, in order to manage lead times, what we were doing before we integrated vertically, or before we even formed partnerships, was that we'd carry stocks of basic yarns, and over time, and for our garment making, even fabrics when we started off. But over time, when we did integrate, we were able to make them a lot faster as and when we need them. So it does help us massively in that regard. The stock that we do need to keep, and that's still a bit of a financial investment, is the cotton, because it generally makes sense to buy cotton during the local season. So we're able to buy more economically. But the advantage we still have is that we're not making a specific yarn out of that. So our risk on inventory is a whole lot lower because cotton is quite liquid.
One of the things that you said, Ali, last time we talked, which I think is an interesting point to bring up here as well, is the impact of vertical integration on your capacity planning. So not only on the material side, but also the labor side, because as a manufacturer, the thing that drives your cost more than anything else in terms of labor costs is, you know, these fluctuations unanticipated fluctuations in demand. So can you tell us, I think, just a little bit about how it's also impacted your ability to manage your labor capacity?
So in the garment making industry in particular, paying a piece rate per garment stitched to the worker is a norm. From the get-go, we actually decided not to do that, and because we thought we're able to, number one, pay the worker a consistent salary in which they can plan their finances on, and we at the end also get better quality, since the worker is not really pushed to make more, to earn more. We were only able to do that because we were vertical. So obviously, because it's a fixed cost, we need to ensure that we're at that level of efficiency, at that level of optimization. So by being vertical, we were able to ensure, or we are able to ensure, that we balance the demand. So if we need fabric faster to feed into the garments, we're able to do that. If we need to make garments slightly earlier for a customer we're able to do that. So it makes it a whole lot easier to support our workers a bit more.
Thank you. There's another question from the audience, which I'm going to put to Anant, which is, what do you think of brands that do their own production or that own their own production facilities? And would integrating brands and retailers, I guess in a more structural way, actually benefit the factory and by extension, therefore, their workers?
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. I think that maybe we're coming full circle, because I know historically there are a lot of brands that did own their own production. In fact, I think that's how it sort of started. You look at some of these classic sort of brands, whether it's kind of Levi's or Carhartt or others that, that may have done it in that way. And then it moved to this model, obviously, of outsourcing. And now, there's so many possibilities in the world today. And one that, we're interested and keen to explore is an idea of sort of what some call onshore manufacturing. But I don't think anyone's been able to kind of crack that or figure it out at scale. One way we're exploring that is as a partnership between a few different brands and other suppliers. And the idea is, it's all really about, being able to manufacture in a way where inventory is completely controlled. So it's almost, the full extent to what we would hope to achieve is like on-demand manufacturing. And I think, like, in order to figure out something as complex and innovative as that, it would be useful to kind of bring together manufacturing expertise, knowledge of the market, branding, design, and all the other things that have become sort of separated at this point.
Yes, the blurring of the line between supplier and brand.
Exactly.
Jessie, we have one more question that's just come in from the audience, but I want to make sure you have a chance too. Have the questions that have come in covered what you had in mind, or is there something you want to add?
Yeah, it partly overlapped, but yes, I would like to ask my question. This question is for Ali. So Ali, I think lots of people like me are very curious about this vertical integration. My question is mostly about the tension between quick response and flexibility of raw material production, because I imagine comparing with a single cut and sew facilities, a vertical integrated facility, of course, can build its fast response to its clients. But then comparing with a single cut and sew facility, a vertical integrated facility now, I think, lose a fabric mill or raw material producer becomes part of itself, and the operational cost is fixed. I found part of my answer from what you shared just now, that when there is a large surge of orders coming in from the client side, you can use the tool called virtual integration to book the capacities of fabric mills, let's say, out of your group. But what if, like last year, when pandemic happens at the beginning, suddenly lots of orders were swept out? So at that moment, how vertical integrated facility deal with that orders dropping down, yet the raw material production capacity is hanging there?
So we were no doubt hit quite hard when the pandemic hit. I think vertically integrated facilities are in general more impacted when orders go to zero, let's say. And that's a very rare occurrence. I hope it never happens again, because we never know what's going to happen in this world. But for us, actually, we were a bit lucky where on the apparel side of things, we actually did have a few orders flowing in, and we were able to actually use that to sustain the other parts of the chain. But I actually do chalk that down to luck, because I do know of several of my friends and several of my competitors that actually did not have those few orders to run. So in our case, vertical integration turned out to be lucky, because just because we were making the end product, we were able to make the fabric for that end product and able to make the yarn for that end product. But there's no doubt that when you are vertical, you are inherently larger. And when you are larger, when orders go to zero, you are hit harder.
Yeah, yeah. Let's hope that will never happen again. Thank you, Ali.
That's
Thank
the
you
hope.
for sharing. Yeah,
It's
that's the hope.
interesting because on the one hand, yeah, being vertical integration means a lot more fixed costs, and that makes you a lot more vulnerable. But on the other hand, I really like what you said about, you know, it's higher risk, you're a lot more vulnerable, but it also gives you options. And
Absolutely.
it sounds like those options are sort of what saved you in the end. I have a question from the audience. I don't have a particular panelist to put it to, so you guys tell me if you want to tackle it or not. Have there been instances where brands in any way have attempted to take advantage or misuse the convenience of having a vertically integrated partner? Any takers? Anant? Okay.
No, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it in that way. I think like maybe one way to respond is just to say that if you are vertically integrated, you know, you can be well, actually this is going back to the sustainability topic, where vertical integration allows for more traceability, more transparency, but then if there's no new work to be done in that area, for example, you know, recently there's been a large push for more transparency into the cotton supply chain. So if brands want to know where their cotton is coming from, they're not going to go to a supplier that's not vertically integrated. They're going to want to work with a vertically integrated supplier to figure out how do you put in the due diligence, how do you get that level of visibility, and then, you know, the hesitation or the reluctance that might come from, you know, a supplier like any of us could just be that it could expose issues that you're not ready to handle. That, not to say that, you know, they're unique to you, they're industry issues, but you might get highlighted because you participate in these pilot or new innovative programs. But ultimately, I think that's like maybe the, you know, initial reaction people may have. But in the long run, I see it as an opportunity to kind of grow and improve. You know, if the industry moves in that direction eventually, then everyone will have to kind of have that level of visibility and transparency. So, you know, it's good to kind of go there first. It's just, it can be risky in the initial phases.
Is there anything that Ali or Halit you want to add? Yeah, Halit.
Actually, just a small addition to what Anant says. This sustainability and responsible production trend brought big manufacturers, vertical manufacturers, and big brands closer, because it means another efficiency, that you consolidate your orders. It helps manufacturer to work more efficiently and make the customer less risky about sustainable concerns. And it means that brands, as long as brands has mentality about making responsible production, offering their customers sustainable products, they need companies who has the same understanding to collaborate. And when they have this kind of partners, they really bond each other very strictly and very efficiently.
Thank you, Halit. Oh, sorry. Did someone want to say something? Okay. We've got 5 minutes left, and I want to actually pick up on this traceability question because it's obviously a hot topic right now. And the question I think that there are a lot of people within the sustainable fashion space who question how possible traceability really is. And I kind of want to ask you, this isn't a question for anyone in particular, so for whoever wants to answer it, do you think that vertical integration is actually the only way to ensure traceability? Do you think it's possible to do traceability if you're not vertically integrated? Ali?
I think vertical integration makes it a lot easier. I think it's certainly possible without, but traceability comes down to a lot of trust. So what I feel, at least, is that even though we're talking more about traceability now, and the reasons behind us looking into traceability is ensuring that they're coming from a fairly paid worker field, right? So that they're coming, so it's ethically grown, for example, and I think that was always, everybody just assumed that that's implicit. And we're just realizing that it's becoming more and more of a problem. And I think the real gap there is trust. And I think it's definitely possible to do without. There's a lot of investment going on and a lot of research going on in these tracers going into the at a fiber level and then tracing back to it. But I think in the future, a lot of it's going to come down to trust. At least that's what my opinion is.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one last question, which is about upskilling and what role vertical integration plays in terms of offering workers the chance to develop more skills. Anant, do you have anything you want to share on that?
It's an interesting one. I haven't really thought about it much, but I'm curious to hear if the other panelists have any experience with this. I would just quickly say that, with a company that's, growing, the positive opportunity here, especially in, kind of the context of COVID and joblessness and so on, is if a company is able to grow, continue to provide employment for those who want it, that in itself is, a really important aspect of, I guess, sustainability in some sense. I don't know at Shahi specifically if we have programs to skill workers so that they could go from garments to textiles, but I think it's an interesting topic for sure.
Okay, on that note, does anyone have any burning last thoughts that they want to add that you maybe feel you haven't had a chance to say before we close this panel?
Actually, it is very big opportunity for working for a vertical company because there are a lot of advantages and opportunities for upskilling our workers and improving their skills. And we need to and there are systems for very systematic way we are offering this opportunities. So as much as workers ask for this option, there are more availability comparing to regular organizations.
Thank you, Halit. On that note, I want to thank all three of you, Ali, Anant, and Halit, for agreeing to come on this panel. It was such a pleasure getting to know a little bit more about your stories. And I want to thank Transformers Foundation for helping us to organize this and working with us on this event and creating a space for these kinds of conversations, because I think they're very needed. And to all of the participants and the audience members for taking an hour out of your day, your busy days, your very long to-do lists to spend a bit of time with us talking about these issues that matter a lot to suppliers. Jessie, anything you want to add to close out?
I've learned a lot from this vertical integration topic, like lots of advantages, especially helpful for building compliance and quality control within the supply chain. And I also learned a lot about special challenges, like for instance, the flexibility of raw material production is usually a special challenge for vertical integrated facility. But I think let's see also there are lots of, I want to point out, there are lots of opportunities and advantages, like you have very unique innovation capacity, for instance, for vertical integrated facilities, and much closer quality control in the production process. So you can remove lots of inspection costs from my past experiences at the end. So
as working for an inspection company.
Yeah. So I think a vertical integration really has lots of advantages, but also have some special challenges. But that makes the whole thing very interesting and very exciting to learn more about. So I wish we could have more discussing with insiders. Yeah.
All right. Annie, is there anything you want to say to close, or are we good to close this out?
On here.
You're back.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today. And again, all registrants will receive a recording of this. So enjoy your day, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.